Oh, we'll quickly introduce Martha. She is not is a stranger to NAWI, actually plays constructive roles in NAWI 1.0. She is now a faculty member at Duke University and has a lot of experience bridging NAWI 1.0 to 2.0. So with no further ado, Martha, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my screen and I hope you can see my face as well. Sorry, I can't be there in person today. But the reason I was asked to speak is because I was actually involved in a project of NAWI 1.0 that was within the modeling and data analysis mission, but was really, or can now in hindsight be thought of as the precursor of the regional systems work that we are going to talk about today. So today I want to tell you briefly about that project, the lessons learned, and a lot of the areas where I still see there's a lot of work to do. So NAWI, as you know, is divided into a few mission areas, but they all relate to developing knowledge and tools to assess how a component fits into its larger system. So for instance, how using different materials affect the performance of the membrane, and then how a unit treatment fits into the treatment train. And then the regional systems are just simply the biggest and maybe the most complex system that NAWI studies. And so on my slide here, you see the example of the water system in Santa Barbara. This is taken from their website. And so the mission here is figuring out how all the new generation water reuse and desalination technologies that NAWI champions fit into our legacy existing water systems, whether there's a place for them to contribute and under what conditions they may be helpful or even necessary. So this may be obvious, but it's important. We don't have the luxury of designing our regional water systems from scratch. We can only retrofit existing systems so that they could continue to serve us long term. And so this means that we should evaluate our new generation technology, and not quite for how great they are in a vacuum in absolute terms, but really for how appropriate they are as a marginal addition to the existing water portfolio. And so the key water here is being fit for purpose. This is very much not a new idea. This is already done in sort of energy system where it's common to have complex portfolios, but applied to water, your portfolio is resilient when it's diverse. And so if you already have sources that provide peaking capacity, so let's say a water reservoir, you might be looking to add a baseline capacity. If your water portfolio is very drought prone, you need a technology that is drought resilient, and so on. It's not only your existing portfolio that determines the marginal value of technology, but it's also your local demand. So depending on how rigid your demand is, or how many households are consuming close to, say, a minimum threshold, you might decide whether you want to go for demand side measures, such as efficiency or conservation, or if you need supply side measure. This is all to say cost is not sufficient to determine the viability of a given demand or supply alternative, but we should think of our alternative options holistically as having a number of attributes that include cost, but also the degree to which they're drought dependent, the potential barriers to deployment, the time to deployment, their energy intensity and relatedly their greenhouse gas emissions, etc. So the problem is we need to choose optimal sources, we need to time their implementation, we need to manage the portfolio of existing water resources, all under uncertainty. So this is a very complex decision problem, and one that calls for the development of a tool that can aid in decision making. So this is how NAWI 310, my NAWI 1.0 project, landed on developing DRIP, or Drought Resilient Interscale Portfolio Planning, which is a tool to think about this problem. So we have our water system or our municipality in the middle there with our water demand. The city is served by a mix of water sources and technology. Here I'm simplifying and drawing the easiest possible portfolio just for this graph. Inputs to this model are all our sources of uncertainty, say climate and drought scenarios, also demand scenarios, and so on. These determine how much surface water is available. And then we also have as inputs all the technology and policy options that may be available to decision makers at the city level. And so once we have these components, we can start to try to solve a dynamic planning problem where we can deploy technology and policy options in response to water availability. So you see dynamic is in all caps there. We call these dynamics because the key with DRIP is we want to move away from the idea of planning statically for a single drought, say plan for a 5-year drought. This is what's currently done in California, or what the state of California requires their water utilities to do. But this 5-year drought concept really simplifies a lot of the actual uncertainty and variability in climate and demand that utilities face. And so we want to move towards a dynamic decision-making approach where we come up with policies that allow us to observe the state of the system and to respond dynamically to changes in the system, such as systems undergoing a drought or experiencing long-term changes in demand, short-term demand shocks, and then take actions in response to those changes. So we parameterize our decision policies or decision trees that link indicators of the system state to actions. The indicators are generally for DRIP, they belong to 3 categories: climate, so drought indices; hydrology, mostly storage; and then technology, install capacity, capacity under construction. And then these indicators are linked to actions, which are all our drought mitigation actions that we can apply to the system, including our new generation technology that is what NAWI is interested in. And so then these decisions are triggered by a number of indicators, and we have an optimization engine that is sort of optimizing everything about this tree: the indicator, the thresholds, the actions, and even the structure of the tree itself. And so our case study was indeed Santa Barbara. This is their water system from their website, and this is how we sort of translated this into our models for simulation. But essentially, there's kind of like the water resources that are coming from somewhere in California. There's the urban system, and then our treatment options. So the treatment options here are modeled through water taps, so another one of the NAWI specific tools here. And so WaterTap is modeling the treatment train of a number of options. We have here potable and non-potable reuse, both in centralized and decentralized modes, and we have seawater desalination. And so through WaterTap, we're able to essentially estimate their capital and operational costs for different ranges of capacity, the different capacities and the scalability that these options offer. And then we made a bunch of assumptions about the time to deployment that will take to deploy these technologies. And these assumptions are essentially informed by past projects around California. And so when we run DRIP, I'm going to jump into some results. We get these sort of decision policies that perform and respond differently to a given drought. So I'm going to show you just one scenario just to kind of have an idea of what this looks like. We have a drought scenario here at the top. Blue and positive values are for more water than average, and then this red values are for drought. So low amounts of water is available. And so what our policy does is essentially installing a centralized capacity for baseline that is sort of online at all times. And then during droughts, it supplements that with decentralized capacity, essentially doing peaking if, again, we want to think about the analogy of the energy systems. But then in this case, we were particularly interested in comparing how planning for a specific drought type can inform planning decisions. And we wanted to compare historical drought types to potentially synthetically generated different types of droughts. So a long and a mild drought up here, and then a short and an intense drought down here. You'll see, without going into too much details here, the type of drought really informs the type of decisions that we want to make when we plan for those different droughts. So for instance, for short and intense, we need a lot of baseline capacity on at all times, because when the drought happens, it depletes our storage very quickly. And so those were single scenarios, but we really run long simulations of these drought types. And so these are the results a little bit more in aggregate. Every bar here is a type of drought. And so we've got the historical, the long, mild one, the short and intense. And the intensity of the orange here is related to the install capacity under that scenario. So we see that the short and intense drought requires the most capacity. What's also interesting is that if we look at current Santa Barbara install capacity, we're just below 200 acre-feet per month, which is quite similar to the 160, 180 acre-feet per month that our model suggests. So this sort of confirms that things seem to be working great for now for Santa Barbara, but also the droughts are changing, and this one type of planning may not be ideal as the droughts change. Not only the entire install capacity changes for different drought types, but also the type of decisions that we should take to face that type of drought change. And so, for instance, if you have frequent drought, these are the ones that use decentralized capacity the most. The stark red indicates a higher percentage of your portfolio coming from decentralized capacity. These all translate into different costs of planning for different droughts. And so when California prescribes a 5-year drought to plan for, this is sort of hiding the uncertainty around the fact that planning for a 5-year drought or a different type of drought can really lead to different costs and different resilience. I have a lot more results if you want to look at the papers, but here I'm just giving a quick overview. But another thing that I wanted to bring up beyond that first analysis is that now we're able to use DRIP to interrogate DRIP in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways that we are interrogating it is by assessing the value at the system level of innovation that may occur at the component level or at the treatment level. So we had our treatment train models that we generated through WaterTap. And so we started playing with the assumptions around cost, say, bringing the LCOW of a certain treatment trains down. And then other assumptions around CAPEX to OPEX ratio, the time to implementation, speed of implementation, et cetera. And then we wanted to see how that affected the costs of planning at the regional level using DRIP. And so there's two ways to do this. One is the more typical kind of scenario-based approach where some innovation scenario is fed into the system and then we get an outcome, for instance, a cost. So this responds to questions such as, what is the value of a 5% cost reduction in water recycling at the city level? But the opposite is also very interesting, where we feed the system a target reduction, and we want to look for all the innovation pathways that lead us to that reduction. And so an example of trying to solve this target-based analysis is reported in this interactive dashboard, where at the top here you can select your target cost reduction for Santa Barbara, for running the Santa Barbara water system. And then these plots update to tell you these are all the pathways that achieve that. And so these one-dimensional plot here on the left achieve that just with one let's say, driver of innovation. There aren't a lot of options here. But then these two-dimensional plot on the right show how you can achieve that level, combining innovation across different components. And so this really shows the importance of looking at multiple innovation conjunctively, because a bunch of additional alternatives show up here. And so the value of a tool like this is that it highlights all the innovation pathways that achieve the largest gains at the system level. And therefore, we can use something like this to prioritize our R&D target at the treatment level. So it kind of goes, we go back from regional system back to treatment train system. And to conclude, this is my last slide. Obviously, there's a lot more work to do in regional systems. There's a lot of work we can do to improve demand, to improve forecast estimations of demand. But one avenue that I wanted to bring up that I see being very complex and also very interesting is when we start bringing the decisions of multiple utilities together. See, the orange circle here is Santa Barbara. And so Santa Barbara was chosen very strategically in my first project because it's relatively isolated from the rest of California water system. And so we were able to kind of analyze this system individually. But for the majority of the other water systems, multiple utilities make water supply decisions independently, but then the consequences of those decisions reverberate through the shared water system. And so if one utility decides to, say, delay water supply investments because they want to prioritize affordability at that time, then they may compromise their own water security, and they may have to depend more on the imported water or the spot market during a drought. But if a lot of utilities decide to delay investments and compromise their water security, then during the next drought, there might just not be enough water to go around for everyone. So how these single decisions of utilities compound and reverberate across the system is very much an open question, and one that I hope may be addressed by NAWI Regional Water System Research. And with that, I wanted to thank you very much for having me speak here. Again, I'm Marta Zaniolo. Send me an email if you're interested in talking more. I would love to.
For a few questions. So anybody out there in the audience have any questions for Marta? Oh, hold on just a second. So introduce yourself and then ask questions so she can hear.
Hey Marta, this is Sunny. I'm a research PhD student at Cal. Andy is my advisor, Andy Jones. And just wondering, you mentioned that water tap is integrated into this planning process. Could you just talk a little bit about how that happened and sort of like what work was required for that?
Yeah, this is a good question. So we can call this a soft integration, not a hard integration, meaning we ran water tap for, let me go back to the slide here. We ran water tap first for a range of capacity that we were interested in because that would fit the Santa Barbara water system well. And we recovered the capital and operational cost of each of these configurations. And then we use those estimations as input to DRIP. So we didn't nest water tap optimization within DRIP optimization because that would be computationally quite challenging. And also perhaps I don't see a ton of value of that because it's not because these two optimizations can be done at different levels essentially. So we can call this a soft integration where the outputs of water tap are the inputs to DRIP.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Oh, okay. Go ahead, Yishen.
Thank you, Marta. Great presentation. One thing I've observed in the last few days here at the NAWI conference is that even though we keep talking about bridging NAWI 1.0 to 2.0, the reality is that most of the toolkits people use in regional water system planning are very distinct from the toolkits that are used at premise scale or even smaller scale. Even water tap, which hopes to bridge the gap, kind of stops at the premise scale, or like in limited cases, multiple facilities. So can you speak to progress or needs to bridge this gap from a technology standpoint? Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to be in the room with you because I think this conversation could probably take the full day, right? I think this is one of the biggest barrier that you're pointing out, and I don't know that there's an easy question to it. Admittedly, DRIP and water tap and the tools that we're developing are complex, and so to imagine that a water utility would just embed this in their decision making is quite a stretch. So I think it's up to us to make this model usable. And so the idea is we wouldn't require water utilities to run these optimization, but hopefully package these models in a way that they can be seamlessly run, where they wouldn't have to open the box of the optimization, essentially. But we're not there yet with this tool. We try to get there using some kind of interactive visuals, but I think there's a lot more work that we can do to sort of make these tools usable. I think if we're able to make these tools usable, then utilities will use them. And so I think it's really, the integration will happen once we are able to make something that can be seamlessly integrated into their decision making. One other thing I'll bring up, I do think dynamic decision making is the future of decision making. So this idea of, like, instead of coming up with a solution, coming up with a decision policy to sort of switch your solutions to depending on the observed characteristics. But this isn't quite how our governance is set up at the moment. Usually we have every 5 or every 10 years the update to the water planning documents. And so this is very much a slow decision-making process that utilities are using. And so I think, on our side, we should make our tools usable. And then on the utility side, is there a way to make decisions in a more nimble way so that you don't have this like very big inertia to update your documents every 5 years and your static plans over every 5 years. So I think these are the two ways that I would look at, but I'm sure a lot of folks in the room have a lot of good perspective on this, and I am jealous I can't be there for that conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, that was actually a great question and answer, because this is going to move into what we're going to be doing over the next couple hours. So that was a perfect segue. So thank you so much, Marta. So we can give Marta another round. And so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So next up is Yishen. He's going to give you a little more background on regional water systems, and then he's going to get into the initiation of the heart of our discussions this afternoon. So as soon as he's a better expert at Zoom than I am. So we'll be with you in just one moment. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much again, everyone, for your this one.
Yeah, either one.
Can folks hear me in the back? Okay, excellent. Thank you for being here. My job is an engagement manager. I keep telling people somewhat half jokingly, my job is about helping scientists and decision makers make friends. So I hope you guys all make a new friend today. But in making friends, it's not advancing here. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We are a team here at NAWI Regional Water Systems program. Mike is our cheerleader, but when we have Julia and Sunny here in the front conducting systematic research and review on the technology side, I'm also I want to give Andy Jones a lot of credit for lifting this work out of ground from the get-go. And as we grow the team, we wanted to make sure that we're here because of you. We wanted to make NAWI as relevant and useful to you all as before. We've heard a lot this morning about the goal of NAWIs to deliver secure water supplies with non-traditional water sources to reduce cost, to reduce energy use. But at this point, everyone knows, right? These tools, these technologies are not for everyone, they're not for everywhere. So the goal of this program is to figure out where, when, and how can these non-traditional water sources play the best role in a regional planning context. It's easier to ask than to answer because the answer is it depends. We have to constantly balance different regional constraints and opportunities. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I doubt many of my neighbors understand that when they turn on the tap on the water, the source water from that drinking water comes hundreds of miles away from the mountain tops of the snow-capped Sierra Nevada through diverse and heavily human-altered landscapes and infrastructure. And going through this, of course, the water utility and water system have to constantly balance trade-offs between resource availability, supplies, cost considerations, and other system-level dynamics. How we understand these dynamics, how we understand these trade-offs, the toolkits we have are constantly evolving. Most recently, a lot of these insights come from practitioners who work hand in hand with scientists. For example, shown here is a graphic for multimodal simulation coming from a paper led by Julia and her team last year, where essentially you can connect different models traditionally used in different subject areas together, couple them to simulate future conditions and their impacts in downstream. In this case, for example, global GCM is downscaled into regional context. That atmospheric forcing is fed into the hydrologic response models of WEAP, which further impacts downstream hydropower impact models of switch to dictate how future conditions change water supply, which in turn change the performance of power generation. And of course, this is just one example. There are so many other examples, and our goal is to figure out which tools and which capabilities can best achieve which purposes and vice versa. That leads to our three major objectives. We probably have seen this graphic before, but essentially we as an RWS topic area, first and foremost, wants to connect NAWI's R&D efforts from 1.0 to 2.0, figuring out the where, why, and how, but also characterizing what technological capabilities are needed in the system planning context. To do that, many users deliver tools and frameworks for adaptive water management, something that Martha hinted at the end of her call, to balance these trade-offs, to manage risk, and to make decisions transparently and adaptively when conditions arise. Last but not least, this is my favorite piece. We're here not just to do research, we're here to cultivate a community of practice. The word practice means that this community is here to share skills, to present ideas, for us to socialize, to challenge each other, to represent our capabilities at different events. So if I can summarize our goals of the RWS and NAWI, it's the what, the how, and the who. Our vision for regional water systems is continuous iterative co-production in collaborative engagement. We envision practitioner engagements to percolate through every stage of the planning process and implementation process. This active stakeholder engagement process would in turn inform the development of the analytics suite, which we have heard a lot through this week. And as I showed before as a multi-model simulation example, this analytical suite by itself is also an iterative process where different scenarios drive model capability selections, feeding into different outcomes to inform decision-making analytics. And in this iteration, after you have the models and tools available, then this iterative process would inform software design, which go back into the feedback loop for further engagement. So if I can take one word out of this text-heavy slide, is iteration. The toolkits for our engagement iteration are multifaceted too. We are conducting stakeholder mapping, which I will talk about in a second. We're conducting stakeholder interviews, even starting as this week. There are workshops. Hey, here we are. And surveys. Some of you might receive ideas for how we shape our programs. So our goal is summarized in those two pictures on the right. We want to be on the ground, listening to the user needs. We also wanted to stay curious enough to scientists and decision makers in a context like this. As we play this game, as we chart our path, we are also advised by external advisors and speakers. These are our project support group members who provide expert advisory service to our program. We cleared conflict of interest process with them, understanding that these experts may not actually pursue our awards so that they can speak frankly about major deliverables and milestones as we progress in our work. Jordan Machnick is from a national lab, Obey is from academia, from university, Mike Wilson from a nonprofit, and Nathan is from Bureau of Reclamation, which is federal government. We intentionally chose our external advisory to span across different sectors because their incentives and driving forces and limitations are all different. And if we want to be successful, we want to make NAWI useful to all of these sectors. The idea of how to start our engagement work started about a year ago when we had a successful scoping workshop in Berkeley and online. We convened about 40 participants, about 50% scientists and 50% water practitioners and industry partners to discuss water challenges and planning challenges hand in hand to inform how we as a program of RWS can move forward. This slide shows some of the major takeaways. I don't think this works, but it's okay. Major takeaways for our program. This is what we heard about a year ago. Essentially, the gist is that to advance NAWI, to advance regional water system planning, novel water technology innovations have to go hand in hand with improved planning, governance, and coordination processes. Because our
I hate to be difficult, but the recording's not going to work unless you fill.
Oh, okay, thank you. I think this will work if I look this way. And our users face multifaceted water system challenges, starting with uncertain future supply and demand dynamics, jurisdictional fragmentation, and misaligned incentives across different governance structure, and of course, limiting planning frameworks that constantly chokehold ideas from planning to implementation. The workshop last year identified a few major themes that we should focus on. The first being that a lot of the problems we face are not easy to tackle. They're systemic, they're structural, and they relate to governance challenges, including the increasing uncertainty of planning difficulties and fragmented governance of different institutions. The second theme was that there were barriers in adopting innovations and solutions, and that's what Mike will pick up in the third hour of this afternoon, tackling either financial constraints, stakeholder and institutional resistance, and other inertia. And lastly, the workshop a year ago identified there is a major gap in decision-making, that the tools we use, even when I say we use, the tools the planners use versus the tools the researchers use are oftentimes different because the research community and the planning community are driven by different incentives and face different realities. The workshop identified a few areas of opportunities for us to invest in, both technology innovations, reducing costs, integrated modeling to make it useful and usable, regional trends to focus on that's deviating from current baseline, and workforce development. We need the right people with the right skills both hard skills and soft skills to tackle these problems. So this was a wish list from the workshop a year ago, and that informed our design for the two streams of investments that Mike presented this morning. To recap, we as Regional Water Systems Program hope to solicit two types of studies. One are regional studies that are practitioner-led, and one type that are focused on capability refinement to produce the frameworks and tools to help support these regional challenges. We are hoping to release public calls pretty soon. At the same time, we are also in constant conversation with DOE about other ways to solicit more opportunities so that we can move actions off the ground. In doing so, we wanted to work with the right people. We wanted to know who we are working with. That is our stakeholder mapping exercise. A lot of you are here because you received an email from me. That email comes from a list of over 100 people who we identified through different partners and events as our stakeholders. And I'm using stakeholders as because scientists are a type of stakeholders. This is the breakdown of by sector. I'm encouraged to see that roughly half of them are researchy people, and roughly half of them, actually more of them, are actually practicing in different sectors, in different levels of government, private sectors, nonprofits, and think tanks. So this reminded us that as we move forward with regional water system ideas, we wanted to make the programs as useful as possible to many different sectors and not just one. Last ongoing activity for now is that we are conducting stakeholder interviews broadly to get the idea of how and what toolkits are useful and how they can be applied in the regional planning context. We secured Institutional Review Board Human Subject Research approval from Berkeley Lab last week and have started talking to as many as 30 experts. And we would love to speak to you for your lessons learned, hopes, and issues that keep you up at night. We wanted our interview process to be purposeful, to be driven by high degree of ethics protocol, to follow diversity in who we reach out to go really deep into the topics and not just scratching the surface. And ultimately, in the rightmost plane, we hope these interview results would achieve a number of goals. First, in helping us in NAWI, how we can structure ourselves better, how we can design our future funding opportunities more effectively. We also wanted to support ongoing research that's directed by the topic area lead, ongoing and future research. And lastly, we'll generate an anonymous synthesis for our DOE program managers. As you heard from this morning, a lot of the energy water resources portfolio's mission highly overlap with NAWI regional water systems. So I see this as an opportunity, and I hope what we talk about in these interviews, maybe some of those with you, can inform how we think we can do our jobs better. So we're here this week, right here. Sunny and Julie are sitting in the front. So if you wanted to get your ideas into the pipeline, ultimately to DOE, but certainly to us, we are actually free all of tomorrow morning to grab a coffee with you or sit and chat. I would love that. So with that, I will pause for questions, but I also wanted to highlight that there is a NAWI network. This QR code gets to nawihub.org/join. It is how our communications team sends out monthly newsletters, open calls, research highlights, and other notes from the leadership. I did notice that when I first joined the NAWI team, that folks in this room working on regional water systems are not very well represented in the current roster list for NAWI network. So we would love for you to join this network so that I can forward less and less emails and that our comms team can get the message straight to you. Is there any questions at this point?